Wanted to say good afternoon to everyone and welcome to the Center for Education Reform's School Choice Lunchtime lesson. It's the National School Choice Week, and I wanted to thank all of you for bringing your lunch and joining us for this important discussion on the suburban charter school effort. At the end of my brief remarks, I'll be taking your questions, and you can submit them at any time during the presentation. Let me start by saying a little bit about who I am. My name is Tom Neumark, and I am the president of the Frederick Education Reform. Uh, President of the Frederick Classical Charter School. Sorry, we're having a few technical difficulties here. And I wanted to share our story as a group of parents in Frederick County, Maryland, a suburban district that wanted to start a charter school. And so how our group began was with another group called FrederickEducationReform.com. There were a group of parents in Frederick County who were concerned about the direction of the school system. We were concerned about the math program that was being used. We were concerned about the lack of a reading program being used that didn't teach phonics. We were concerned about the lack of history and social studies. And we were concerned about the science, the approach that was being used for science, which was an inquiry-based approach. And so we saw these trends and had been trying to work within the school system to see if we could get some of the things that we wanted to see changed. And of course, we were met with resistance at every step of the way. And so we worked for years to try to remove the math program and replace it with something better and to make the other changes that we were hoping. Unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition, so we decided that maybe a more productive route would be to start a charter school. We knew the difficulties would be great, but we thought it would be worth it to provide an opportunity for children in our area to experience something different. And so what we came up with was the Frederick Classical Charter School. It was the classical model is actually the longest running model in Western civilization. Of any of the models for educating children, this is the model that's been around the longest. It's also one of the most successful models. And so in a classical education, it really addresses a lot of our concerns as parents. In terms of the way it's structured, the history is actually used as the organizing structure for the humanities. So our students will be getting a much richer selection of history. So for instance, in first grade, students learn ancient history. Second grade, they learn about the Middle Ages. And in third grade, they learn about the Renaissance. And then in fourth grade, they learn about modern times. And everything is integrated with that. So the art and the music that are studied at each grade level integrate with the history. And then in 5th through 8th grade, they repeat the same sequence again. So by the time they reach high school, they've actually had 2 complete sweeps through world history. The math program we were going to use is Singapore Math, which is used by the highest achieving nation in the world. And the science program we're going to use corresponds to it. So when students are learning about ancient history, something that the ancients knew about were plants and animals. So we study biology, and just biology, in depth in first grade. And then in second grade, when students are learning about the Middle Ages, that's when the great astronomers appeared in history. So we study earth science and astronomy during that time, and just that one subject in depth to mastery. In third grade, it's the Renaissance in chemistry, because that's when the great chemists appeared. And then in fourth grade, we study physics, because modern history and physics, physics is a modern subject. So it all integrates in a very neat package. And so that's what we wanted to create. And so one of the challenges you face in a suburban district, especially in Maryland, which Education Week is ranked #1, there's a perception that our schools are great. There's nothing wrong. There is, you couldn't possibly improve upon this. But what we found is the strength of our model attracted hundreds and hundreds of parents who felt that something was missing in their education in the regular public schools. And so though there certainly were those status quo people who would say that everything's great and we shouldn't have charters, we were overwhelmed with the response by parents in Frederick County, which is a relatively affluent district, has been ranked highly in Maryland, and Maryland's been ranked highly by Education Week in the nation. And so despite all those accolades, parents knew what the real deal was. They knew that the substantive content that they were looking for wasn't something they could get in the regular public schools. And they knew that, if you really want to be excellent and compete on a world stage, you have to use excellent curriculum. That's what our program was providing, and it was a godsend to many parents. It was exactly what they were looking for, the logic and the coherence of the model. And so we started down this process of writing an application. So we wrote an application. Our application is actually, to our knowledge, the largest and most comprehensive application in Maryland. It's about 1,500 pages long. It's one of the longest you'll see. The reason why we did this is that in Frederick County, prior to us, the previous application was denied because they used the Frederick County curriculum. And though you would think that Frederick County would approve of a charter school using its own curriculum, they didn't believe it was sufficiently developed. So what we did is we actually went line by line and aligned every single item in our classical approach to what Maryland was doing to make sure that we were in alignment, and that couldn't be used as a reason for denial. So then we applied to the Board of Education. Got a lot of questions. At one point in the discussion, they said we were too similar to them. At one point, they said we were too different. So you have to take that for what it's worth. The bottom line is they denied us, and they denied us for reasons that, of course, if those of you who have been with charter schools for a while know just really didn't add up. One is that we didn't have an adequate facility at the time of our application. And, of course, just prior to our school being denied, 2 months before, there was another charter school that was proposed in Frederick County. They didn't have a building either, and they were given a contingent approval to find a building. We were not. So clearly, there was something going on just beyond the merits of the argument. Clearly, our school was something of a threat to this district, or there was something personal going on. So what we did is and the other reason was that they thought our curriculum was, even though we were different in every possible way, they said that we were similar in rigor and we were aiming for college preparation, and so were the regular public schools. Therefore, they were similar. Even though we teach Spanish and Latin and they didn't, and we were different in every subject area in terms of the curricular that was used and the content that was being taught, even though we were substantially different and the pedagogy was substantially different, they deemed us to be too similar. Bottom line, we were denied. One board member, though, really liked our application and voted against it on purpose so that she could bring it up later, because the Roberts rules say if you are on the prevailing side, you can bring something up later. So she did. So after the next election came, a larger group of pro-charter candidates were elected to the Board of Education, and they ultimately approved our charter in April of 2011. So now we're an approved charter. Wonderful thing. A lot of excitement. We can start to move forward. We still were working on our building. One of the things that's very challenging for charter schools in Maryland is we are not given facility funding. And so since we aren't given facility funding, and since our per pupil allocation is actually 69% of what the regular public schools receive, it's really hard for us to find a building that's of adequate space and that we can afford. And in Frederick County in particular, the zoning is such, they didn't even have a zone for charter schools. Up until a couple of years ago, they made a few minor modifications to provide a zone for charter schools. But it's still very, very restrictive. It's very, very hard to find a place that is adequate. We found lots of spaces we could move into that would have been safe and adequate, but they weren't technically zoned correctly, and so we weren't able to go into those. Okay, so we're looking for a building. We found a building. We actually had a philanthropist that was donating to a local youth group, the Frederick Alliance for Youth, to try to reach after at-risk kids. And they wanted to partner with us, have us provide rental income to them. They would build a school for us, which also doubled at night as a youth center, which was a great marriage, if you will. We needed the school during the day. They needed it during the night. By splitting the cost, they could afford a bigger youth center than they could have otherwise. We could afford a school that we couldn't have afforded otherwise. So we got approval for that building, and unfortunately, the philanthropist that was donating to them decided that they weren't going to meet the conditions of the grant in time for the school to start, and so that building went away. So then we went to our backup plan. We had another building, and the board approved this building as well, unanimously approved it. Interestingly enough, on the night that they approved the building, we had made it very clear to them that given the fact that we don't have charter school, we don't have facilities funding, and the landlord was going to front the $1.4 million it took to build out the school, which is a wonderful gift, something that's very hard to find, a space that is zoned correctly for a school that has a lot of parking and everything that you need, and where you have a landlord that's willing to lend you $1.4 million to build out a space and then pay it back over time. It's a wonderful gift. We felt like we were finding a needle in a haystack, and we found it. And so the thing that we needed, though, to be able to afford to pay back the landlord, given the fact that we only have 69% of the funds that a regular public school did, what we needed to do is we needed to spread our payments out over 8 years instead of the 4 years that the Board of Education wanted the charter school to have as its initial term length. And so we submitted lots of information to the Board of Education, and they approved our building unanimously. And then there was some question as to whether they had approved the 8-year charter as well, and they in fact did not do that. We asked them after the vote, we said, did you just also approve the 8-year charter as well? And they said no, they hadn't. They would address that later. Well, that was November of this year. Then it became December. We sent many letters expressing the urgency of the situation and the fact that the Board of Education not only approved our building, they gave us a deadline to get the construction permit, to get the building permit to start fitting out the space, while at the same time denying the terms and conditions that were needed to actually sign the lease so we could begin that process. December came and went. We again asked the board if they would approve the 8-year charter. This is a public waiver request is what we had done, by the way. So the idea is that you can ask for an exception to the standard policy, which is 4 years, and get an 8-year waiver request. We thought we were on very solid ground, again, because the Montessori school that started in Frederick prior to us, the very first charter school in Maryland, actually had an 8-year charter term that was retroactively approved for its first term, and then got a second 8-year charter term. But the Board of Education, despite that history, did not approve us to do that in December, but delayed the decision and said we'll decide January. So this month, just a few weeks ago, they decided to vote in closed session on our public waiver request, and they voted not to do it. And so here we are with an approved building. Now the board did extend our deadline to get the building permit 1 month till April, but they still haven't approved the terms and conditions on the building. And so, certainly our view is if the board is serious about school choice, since they unanimously approved this building and approved the charter, it would only make sense to approve the 8-year charter term as well. So that's a high-level overview of some of the struggles that you'll go through in a suburban district. Any little nit that opponents of school choice can find to try to defeat your school, they'll do it. And so we've fought our battles for years now. We're actually going on 3 years attempting to approve this school. And we're hoping we're going to open this August. We really are. We really hope that the board will change its mind and change its mind quickly so we can get the building permit and build the school. But we're going to another board meeting again tonight to try to open the school. So that's our situation. But speaking in general, one of the things that we really learn is that, and we have a question here about this. It just dovetails nicely into my next comment. So someone from William from Morristown, New Jersey, said suburban New Jersey seems to face the same challenges to approval that Maryland does. Is this scenario being played out all over? And yes, absolutely. Everywhere we look, any bureaucratic sand that can be thrown in the faces of charter school applicants, they will throw. And it's really unfortunate because the local boards of education make it so difficult to do a good thing. This is all about children. This is all about making sure that children have the kind of educational environment that suits them. And it is being played out all over. And the question, though, I would ask, and then offer what I think an answer to it is why? Why is this being played out so over? Why is it that local boards of education don't want to approve charters? And there are a number of reasons, but most of it really traces back to the strength of the charter school law in the state in which you are applying. And I haven't looked at New Jersey's law, but I can tell you Maryland's law ranks, the Center for Education Reform has ranked them very low. I think they're in the bottom 6 or 7. Other organizations have also ranked them as having one of the worst charter school laws anywhere in the country. And so some of the things that in most of the charter schools in the country that are just by default given to charters, we fight for in our contract. So for instance, most charters outside of Maryland are automatically non-union, but we're required to be unionized here in Maryland. Most charter school laws will offer some sort of waiver of the certification requirements. So many of the teachers that we want to hire, we prefer that you've taught at a classical school before. Well, most of the classical schools are private schools, and the people that have the skills and the experience to do that are often very qualified educators with over a decade of experience, but they're not considered qualified to work at our school because they don't have the piece of paper that says they're certified in the state of Maryland, even though in many cases they actually have a decade or more of teaching experience, and yet someone fresh out of college that doesn't even have anywhere near the experience is considered qualified for our school. So a lot of the challenges we face are that. Also in Maryland, because of how it works, most places, charter schools are, the employees of the charter school are employees of the nonprofit that runs the charter school, but in Maryland they're employees of the district. And so what happens is the district then can veto your hiring decisions. Because we are unionized, we can't, it's next to impossible to actually remove a teacher that's not performing well. And we're dealing with all the bureaucracy that goes with having a unionized workforce, where we can't even direct the principal in our school, for example. So for instance, if we as a charter school, we spent years, researching this model, we have a group of parents that understands classical education very well. If we want our principal to do something, we have to actually ask the Frederick County Public Schools instructional director to please direct the principal on our behalf to do something, which that's not even the norm in Maryland. And in other districts in Maryland, we're given the ability to do that. So let me answer another question. So one of the comments here is about the LEAs. It's actually a comment. It says, it's important to reiterate that the local education agency wants to, take authority away from charters. And so that's absolutely right. What we're given in our charter school is we're given the responsibility for running a school, running it successfully, running it with less money available to run it than the regular public schools, and yet they want to have the responsibility, the authority of actually running the school. And so it definitely is not a fair situation here in Maryland, and in many places like Maryland that have weak laws, that's the outcome that you get. All right, let me see. I have another question here. So it says, do you constantly cultivate the Board of Education with tours, open houses, and academic data? Well, right now our school, we don't have a building, so we haven't been able to give a tour or an open house or academic data from our particular school, but we certainly have shared the data about charter schools nationally, which is very positive, and also the data about the U.S.'s performance in international comparisons, which isn't very good. So, for instance, one of the things that we talked about to parents and to the school board, which is really a great opportunity, we think, for Frederick County, is if you look at Singapore, the nation of Singapore, they are consistently ranked as the top country in the world in mathematical achievement. And to give you an idea of how much better they are than the average American student, and there's a citation for this on fredericeducationreform.com, the average student in Singapore would score in the top 10% of U.S. math students, right? Or to put that another way, if you're in the top 10% of U.S. math students, you're merely average in Singapore. And so we are going to use that math program and try to get our students to score every bit as high as the average kid in Singapore is scoring. So we were definitely trying to cultivate the Board of Education's knowledge of charters. We had multiple open houses. We invited all of the Board of Education to attend. A few did, but most did not. Still in Maryland and in states that have weak laws, charter schools are kind of viewed as a thorn in the side of the local system instead of what we're trying to be. We're trying to work cooperatively with the school board to expand their portfolio of options for students and really be integrated into the public school system while still maintaining the independence, the autonomy we need as a charter school to run our charter school effectively and remain true to our mission. I have another question here from Elizabeth from Silver Spring, Maryland, and she said, how much of a role do parents play in the approval process? Do you have things like hearings and petitions and the design of the school, and how did you build that coalition? So that's a great question. We were overwhelmed by the amount of support we had. What we did is we started in 2009, a group of parents started from Frederick Education Reform, which was a education reform advocacy group in Frederick, Maryland, and we started having meetings at my house and other people's houses to talk about our concerns with the direction of the school system and how we might address it in a positive way. And so we held those meetings, and then we had enough of a core group that we would start to hold public meetings. We knew what we were going to propose. We knew it was going to be a classical education. We knew how to describe that to parents. And so we started doing that. And the response was overwhelming. Parents were saying, why aren't the regular public schools doing this? This approach makes so much sense. Why aren't all charter schools? Why aren't our schools charter schools? Giving parents more say in their education is a wonderful idea. We need to do more of this. So we have been, overwhelmed by that. And so we have a group of founding families that started the school, and then we've continued to grow our list of supporters. We're right now over 900 supporters. If you go to frederickclassicalcharterschool.org and view our support list, we're over 900 supporters of parents and other citizens that want this school to happen. So we've been overwhelmed. We've had parents attend petition, sign this online petition, if you will, go to the hearings. There's been an enormous outcry of public support. And I think that says a lot. Parents really do hunger for school choice, but the bureaucratic hurdles that are present in a state like Maryland that does not have a strong charter school law really is hampering parents' ability to choose the kind of schools they want for their kids. All right, so I have another great question here. It says, how do we start to change the dialogue in Maryland that we can't be this #1 ranking that we have in Maryland? How do we start to change that dialogue? How can more parents get active to impress upon our elected officials the need for school choice? And the way we've done that as we've always said, we can certainly take issues with the ranking. I mean, if you look at the NAEP scores, the NAEP scores are nowhere near as impressive as saying a #1. All right, so if you look at the NAEP scores for Maryland, National Association for Assessment for Educational Progress. If you look at the community colleges, the vast majority, more than half of the community college students entering from Frederick Public Schools, more than half, I believe the last number was somewhere in the low 60 percentile, about 60% of the students, most of them, cannot pass a remedial math test, an entrance exam, a basic exam in algebra, cannot pass that, and end up in remedial classes in the local community college. So we can say we're #1, but the truth on the ground is students are not prepared for college. They just aren't. They don't have the background knowledge, and we need to change this dialogue in Maryland. And whether you're someone who thinks that Maryland's #1 and we just ought to pursue excellence, or that Maryland has a lot to be improved upon and needs to make a lot of improvements, I think the thing we all agree on is we can go a lot farther. And so schools like Frederick Classical Charter School that are really aiming to set a high bar for rigor are very well supported by parents. And I think you'll find more and more schools that are trying to do that will, if they're allowed to start, will help to raise the bar in Maryland. But I think the issue is, quite frankly, that local school boards are scared. They're shy of charter schools. We do provide competition. As much as we say we want to work with them and be cooperative, the reality is we provide a basis of comparison for the regular public schools. And I think there's a lot of school districts in Maryland, for sure, are shying away from having something to be compared to. All right, so let's see. I have another question here. What changes need to be made in Maryland's law, or even laws in general, to make the process easier than kind of pushing and pulling with your school board and engaged in this drawn out negotiations process where you're trying to get just a little bit of autonomy, which is what we were trying to do? So there are several changes that Maryland really needs. One is we should not put the local school boards in charge of authorizing charter schools. It's kind of like if you put Home Depot in charge of authorizing Lowe's, or you put McDonald's in charge of authorizing fast food restaurants. Well, what are you going to get? You're going to get one of two things. You're either going to get a lot of denials because they don't want the competition, or you're only going to approve school models that look exactly like the regular public schools. So the first thing you have to do is have independent authorizers, someone other than the local school board who is willing to take an objective look at the school and who has the expertise to. Again, we're, as charter schools, we're not the focus of the school system. The local school system, what they do is they want to focus on their regular public schools. They don't really want to deal with the charter school. It's kind of a distraction to them. And so what the benefit of an independent authorizer is they can focus on charter schools. They understand their needs better. They understand what makes them successful. And they can really focus on making sure that Maryland has all sorts of options for parents, and take this charter school problem away from the local boards. Let it be the problem of independent authorizer. The other thing that we need for sure is to make sure that we have the autonomy that we need. The way charter schools should work is basically the local school board should authorize the charter school, the authorizer, whoever it is, the local school board or the independent authorizer should authorize the charter school if it's good enough to be authorized, and then should get out of its way, should not go and try to micromanage the charter school, which is exactly what happens in Frederick County. The reason it happens is because the employees in all Maryland charter schools are employees of the local school board. They shouldn't be. They need to be employees of the charter school itself, of the nonprofit, which is how most schools do it. Most charter schools do this. If we had that, then we don't have to, we can hire the teachers we want, not subject to a veto, which we're subject to a veto. We can actually say, this is the person we want to be our principal, this is the person we want to be a first grade teacher, and Frederick County can say, nope, we disagree, we want you to pick someone else. That's unheard of in charter school circles, but that's how they work in Maryland. So that has to change. We have to be the employer of the people at the charter school. Also, the restrictions with regard to a certification. Certified does not mean qualified. Teacher certification, there's lots of evidence that shows that teacher certification doesn't really mean very much at all when it comes to being a good teacher. In fact, it actually tends to do, in my view, the opposite of it. It actually tends to lower standards by limiting the pool to those who attended education schools. And we know something about folks that attend education schools. We know, according to the National Council for Teacher Quality, that education schools, 80% of them don't teach teachers how to teach scientifically based reading instruction. 87% of the teachers do not have the math content knowledge to teach elementary math. So if we did those things, if we had independent authorizers, we allowed charter schools to be non-union and the employees of the charter school to actually be employees of the nonprofit, if we waived the certification requirements, and if we provided equitable funding, which Maryland does not do. We don't get facilities funding, and we only get 69% of what the regular public schools get. If we actually had those things in place, we would have a real charter school law. We wouldn't have Maryland's what I call pretend charter school law, which is so weak. It's great that we have something, but it really is not how charter schools are supposed to be run. All right, so I have another question coming here. Let's see here. The next question is, do you share best practices with local schools? Have they approached you? So it's an interesting thing. So during our approval process, one of the things that happened, Frederick County had approved a math program called Turk Investigations in Mathematics, which is generally regarded by a lot of mathematicians and certainly by us as a very, very weak math program, one of the weakest that there is. And so as it's interesting, because I think in part our school was being started, and we talked about the fact that we were using Singapore math, which was such a well-regarded program, we provided a basis of comparison for the local school board. And so I think our influence there is that they looked at Singapore math and some of the other programs that we had recommended, and there was a lot of interest in the public in that. And so what ended up happening is there became an increasing outcry against this Turk Investigations in Math, which ultimately was removed from the system. So though we are certainly willing to share best practices with local schools, they have not approached us yet, but I still do think there's some influence there in that, if you're seeing that a group of parents is offering, one of the best math curricula in the world, and the local school system is offering something that is just horrible, I think there's a positive influence there that helped that be removed. But one of the best practices that we would like to share with the local public schools is in reading instruction. We are actually offering some free seats to the local school board to send whatever teachers they want to our training and reading instruction. So to give you an idea of what we did with our school, we're working with a veritable who's who of education experts. Vern Williams, who's on the National Math Panel, is on our Board of Advisors. Stephen Wilson, who's done a lot of work for the Fordham Foundation. Dr. Betty Morgan, who's National Superintendent of the Year last year. Sandra Stotsky, who's done great work in education reform in Massachusetts and elsewhere. We have a lot of well-known folks. And one of the people we work with was actually Dr. Louisa Moats, who's known as one of the top reading researchers in the United States. And we asked her for some advice on how we could do an excellent job of teaching reading. One of the things that is a trend in education today is the whole language or balanced literacy approach that does not systematically and explicitly teach phonemic awareness and phonics, and it results in a lot of kids being referred to special education who shouldn't be, and a lot of kids struggling with reading who wouldn't struggle if they were just given the proper instruction in the first place. And so one of the things we're doing is we're providing all our teachers with this extensive training. As I said before, there are a lot of statistics that show that if you go through an education school, you're not really getting the kind of training that you need to be an effective teacher, and certainly not getting the kind of training that we would expect you to have as a classical teacher. And so we're giving teachers this LETTERS training, which is language essentials for the teachers of reading. It's an excellent program. It takes 4 years for teachers to actually go through, 2 years to go through the basics of it, and then 2 years for those who want to take the more advanced version. And we're going to share the opportunity to get that training with the school system at no charge. As long as they're paying for the teacher's time who they want to send, we're going to pay out of our reduced budget for the professional development opportunities to actually have a nationally known trainer come in and teach teachers that. We're also thinking about opening up the seats, if we can, for our math training in Singapore math. And we have some other training in direct instruction, training by Dr. Daniel Willingham in cognitive science, some really neat learning opportunities that we would love to share with the regular public schools so that they too could benefit from some of those best practices. So we certainly want to share those best practices. We're hoping that the school system will be open to taking us up on it. All right, we have another question from Brian in Maryland, and Brian's asking, how are you going to use digital learning in your classical model? It's an excellent question. I have to say that in our classical model, which is based on the trivium, it's more about the sequence and the content, and it's not, we don't have an emphasis on digital learning. We do, in our reading program, have some online modules that students can learn. But in our approach to classical education, what we say is it's the contents modality that we use. So if a topic happens to lend itself to digital learning, we would use that. But we don't try to force digital learning for digital learning's sake. We're certainly not trying to be an online school, which, by the way, is not allowed in Maryland, unlike other states. But our approach to digital learning is we don't emphasize it. We use it as a tool if needed. Our real focus is on the elements of a classical education, on providing this rich, substantive content taught in a way that's in accordance with what research shows works, instead of the trends we see in education, which is math programs that don't have a lot of math in them, reading programs that don't follow scientifically based reading instruction principles that have been shown to reach nearly every child, history that's taught in a scattershot fashion instead of a coherent, chronological order, which is what we're teaching, and science that it skips from topic to topic instead of providing the in-depth ability to focus on a single subject in each grade and focus on it and learn it to mastery, and then integrate all of the subjects with each other using history as an organizing theme. So that's a long answer to how are you going to use digital learning in your classical model. So another question we got here is, are the objections to your most recent school similar to those posed the first time around? Have school board members become more savvy, or are they rehashing the same points? That's an interesting question. And so the answer is the objections we're getting now are, in my view, they don't really make sense. So the objection we're getting is really that we want to be able to get our building. We have to have an 8-year charter to be able to afford to pay the rent and pay back the $1.4 million investment that our landlord has so generously offered to front for us, and then have us pay back over 8 years. So the sticking point from the board, I think, is even though they've granted 2 8-year charters before, there's still a lot of fear that, well, what happens if your charter school doesn't succeed? Or are we on the hook for anything financially or legally? And of course the answer is no, they are not. And we pointed to them to other places such as Washington, D.C. and Arizona that offer 15-year charters. So the sticking point for the board really right now is, the length of the charter term, which should be a no-brainer for them. They are under no ongoing obligations if the school doesn't work, and it doesn't really make any sense. In Maryland, especially, 94% of all the charter schools in Maryland actually get renewed. So of all the charter schools that have been started, there have only been 3 that have not been able, that have gone out of business, so to speak. And so the odds are very much in our favor, and especially with an application like ours that was, so very thorough and involved such well-known national people. I mean, I think if we're assessing the risk here of us, not getting a renewal after 4 years is extremely low. But that's kind of where the school board members are. They're stuck on that one issue, and it's, as a charter school applicant and as a parent, all we need them to do is change a 4 to an 8 on a piece of paper, and we have a school that parents are just clamoring for and would love to start, sending their kids to. It's really unfortunate that to not start a school that you've approved and given a deadline to get a building, and to have that all hinge on changing a single number on a piece of paper where there's no consequence to the school system simply doesn't make sense to us. We got another question. Do you share your application with other groups hoping to open a school as a model? And the answer is we've had several inquiries from both within Maryland and several places in different other states. We had an interest in Washington State and someone from Georgia and someone from Maryland so far. And we've had others, at conferences and things say that they were interested in our research and so on. At the moment, we have not shared our application with other groups, but we are entertaining the possibility of doing that. We've done a lot of research on it, and we could save a lot of groups time who had an interest in starting a classical approach that was based on, to the degree possible that scientific research is available in a subject, we've tried to follow it. And so, yes, we are interested in that. And if there are folks interested in our model, we'd love to hear from you. We are entertaining, offering that application, perhaps for some fee, to other schools. It is definitely a consideration. Our long-term goal for this school is we want to start out, get started, see how well we do, make the adjustments, kind of work out the kinks in our model, and then over time open more and more schools within Maryland and then broaden our reach over long term. And our long-term goal is to be a replicable model that others can use so that you don't have to reinvent the educational wheel here. If you want to provide an excellent classical education, we'll provide a way to do it as well as advice. The next question I got is, how do you feel about the possibility of sharing space with a traditional school, such as how New York City has done it? Well, that's an interesting question. As you know, charter schools in Maryland don't get facility funding, and we get a reduced budget. So one of the options for us is to look within the existing system for empty spaces that we could share. And we've done this for a period of years now. We have asked on multiple occasions, is there an empty building? Could we share space? And the answer has always been from our local district, no, that they don't have any space that they're willing to share with us or able to share with us. And I think that's unfortunate that we're in that position, but we are very interested in sharing space, or having a school building that used to be a school that's being that they're moving, they're renovating and building a new school, and they're going to have this old building on their hands that's still adequate for a school, just a little older. We've explored those types of options in Frederick County, and we are certainly interested in pursuing it. But in our case, the local school board just hasn't had the interest or the availability of a space to offer to us. So I've got another question here, and thanks for the question very much, by the way, the last question. What's next in our area? This is the last question. Are we at a tipping point? Are there plans in the works for other charters with an alternative focus? So in our area, for our focus right now, there are several other charters that are interested in applying to Frederick County. We had Frederick County is the place where the first charter school in Maryland started. It was a Montessori model. There's a second Montessori school that wants to start in Frederick because the first Montessori school is so popular. There were something, and I'm going to give you the rough numbers, something like 800 applicants for 15 available slots. So there's such an interest, they actually decided to start another school, and that school has been approved by the board, but it too is also struggling to find a building in Frederick County because of the difficulties I described earlier. There's also an outdoor school that is applied in Frederick County, and again, one of the things that is really interesting to us from a county promoting itself perspective is that we have people coming from Montgomery County and other counties now to apply to Frederick County, thinking that because of the latest election, our board has become a little more, not as much as it was we hope it to be, but a little more charter friendly. And we have parents saying they will actually move to our county if more charter schools are started. And so I think what's next in our area is, if we want to promote Frederick County as a great place to live, just as any county wants to promote itself as a great place to live, you really need to offer parents school choice. It's one of the things that parents are looking for when they choose an area. And especially since we neighbor Pennsylvania here in Maryland, I have parents who have come from Pennsylvania and were shocked to know that there's only one charter school in Frederick County, because it's the norm in other places. So are we at a tipping point is the question, and I'll end on that. And I think the answer is yes, we are. We are at a tipping point in Maryland. We have to make a choice. We're either going to have a real charter school law that provides real choice, or we're going to continue in the status quo mode or tweak around the edges that and make changes that don't really make any changes, and continue to stifle the growth of charter schools when so many parents want it. So I think we are at a tipping point. I think we can make a choice. I don't believe in trends. I believe in choices. And I think the choice we have to make in Maryland is to have a strong charter school law, and therefore be able to meet the needs of all the children and all the parents in Maryland that are crying out for more options, even in a suburban district that is supposedly doing well. Charter schools can enhance the education of the children and enhance the reputation of the system and make your county a more attractive place to live. So I'll end with that, and I want to say, thank you very much for attending and spending your lunchtime with me. That concludes our session for today. School choice is so important for our children and for children's education and for real sustainable education reform in the United States, so that we can compete with other countries. I hope you will join the Center for Education Reform again tomorrow, and when the president of CER, Jeannie Allen, is going to discuss the political forecast for school choice at noon Eastern Time. You really don't want to miss Jeannie Allen, so I hope all of you guys who are attending this session will be able to attend that one as well. Thank you very much, and have a great school choice week.